I was really sick and the doctors thought that I was dying. So my mom, being very religious, she took me to church for them to pray for me. And my father, he is totally against church and prayer and all of that. So he got really upset. And he was like, enough is enough. And he beat up my mom and she lost her voice. Then a few days after, he started asking for passports. And I'm like, why would you need our passports? So I told my mom that he was asking for them because she's the one that has them. And she was like, we need to get out of here. And that same night at 3 a.m., she was like, Kezia, pick a country, pick a state, pick anywhere. Just book a flight. We're getting out of here. And I was like, just pick a flight in the middle of the night. I was so confused, but at the same time, I understood that we need to go. So I just picked New York City and here we are. We came here and we were staying with a relative, but after a few days, we started to tell them why we came to the United States. And they were like, we know who your husband is. You can't stay here. You gotta go. They were so afraid of him and his family and what they knew that they were capable of just getting their way. So they were like, you gotta go. So my mom went in Google and she found the domestic violence hotline. And that's when they came and they got us from upstate. And ever since then, we've been moving from shelter to shelter. We just got our own first apartment. So, yeah.
This is Conversations, a Sanctuary for Families podcast. My name is Deborah Lee. I'm an immigration attorney with Sanctuary for Families. And today we're talking with our client, Kezia. Sanctuary for Families is a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing services to victims of domestic violence, sex trafficking, and gender-related violence. Thank you so much for telling your story. You've been through a lot. I know that it's very difficult to talk about these things. Have you been able to talk about your experiences with domestic violence with other people?
It took a couple of years to actually accept what was happening around me and what was happening with my family. But when I came to the United States 2 years ago, when I became a client of Sanctuary for Families, and I had my first therapist, that was the first time that I actually learned how to tell my story.
Can you tell me why you wanted to invite these guests today to talk about their experiences?
Being a client of Sanctuary for Families has made me realize that there are people from different parts of the world that are going through similar thing to what I went through. There are people all around the world going through domestic violence. There are people around the world that in their country it is normal for them and they have to go somewhere else to seek refuge. I wanted to know if it's because of the culture that we live in, if it's just the kind of people that we deal with, or is it a family trait? Like, what is the birthplace for domestic abuse?
And Kezia actually wanted to bring in some other people for us to talk with about some of their experiences with domestic violence.
Today in the conversation, we have 3 people. We have Maria. She's also an immigrant from Argentina. She has 2 boys. We also have John, a heterosexual male that was abused by a woman. We also have Shantae J sharing her story of domestic abuse with men and women. Today in this conversation, Shantae J, Maria, and John are going to talk about family, gender, and culture and how that impacted the domestic violence they went through.
I come from Argentina. Argentina is a country in South America. And in our culture, we use a word all the time they call machismo. Machismo is a strong word because it really is make the reference about the men, how the men treat the women in aggressive way. Sometimes on the street, when you call or when you walk, men, they tell you, oh, wow, you look caliente. Means that you are burning, and in some way it's an insult. So you grow, or I grow in that environment. Accepting a lot of things. So, plus my religion, I'm Catholic. So when I got married, I thought I got married forever. And I had to accept everything. My first husband, he came from a dysfunctional family. I saw all that he went through, but I thought that at the same time, being with him, I could change him. I'm helping him. So at the beginning, working, it was fine because I helped him. I was supporting him so he had a chance to go to school. Because I was married, I thought, okay, this is part of the marriage, So one kid came, then another pulling hair, slapping me, a lot of things, that he did when I didn't accept the things that he said to me. But when I had my first child, the things changed because I was outside seeing how he treated my kids. There, I did the change. And I said, one thing it was about me, but I couldn't accept what I saw that he did to my children.
My name is John. I first encountered domestic violence as a child. My mother was constantly beaten by her boyfriend. And I recall my mother telling me when I was about 10, she grabbed me by my shirt very hard and said, never hit a woman. And I remember that. And from that point, I never even thought of hitting a woman. She instilled that in me. But I became the victim of other women. And but I'm dealing with it. Hopefully I can get some resolve out of it and learn some skills and techniques on how to prevent this in future relationships.
I was a senior in high school and I was dating this guy. I thought, things were good until I saw a different side of him where he and I were hanging out and all of a sudden he switched. And so the first time domestic violence showed up for me personally was when I was in a relationship and he threatened me and my family. It was an intense moment because I still didn't know what to do. Yet quickly, in that particular moment, I made a choice and was like, okay, be calm. You'll leave. Okay, great. Never see you again. It showed up again. I started dating women and I had a girlfriend and her and I knew her past. I had seen her actually in action in her past, but I was like, it's not going to happen to me. And so the first time it showed up in that particular relationship was probably about 3 months in. And what was so surprising was because this is a relationship that I was in and it was with a woman. So I'm thinking like, what? No, she's human. And so it showed up in a way where I was beaten in broad daylight. I was that person who was staying because I remember begging for her not to leave, begging for her to be in my life, begging continuously to the point I became like a stalker and I kind of lost myself. And so I was really in love and I thought to myself, well, you know what? She's not going to do it again. But she did.
Do you think it was because of culture why you went through this abuse? Or is it just that that's the kind of person that person is? Or do you believe that you did something or someone did something that made this person start to abuse you?
When I think about it, for when I was in a relationship with a woman, even for her, I felt she had had the opportunity to do that in her past relationships that culturally, like it didn't come from her home. It wasn't that she had experienced that. It was her way of expressing her anger, that she didn't have a method or he didn't have a method of being able to balance their anger or their tension and being able to communicate. And so they felt the need to verbally and physically communicate it out.
Being in Jamaica, I had no one to talk to because speaking to the authorities, speaking to a counselor, everyone says the same thing, just domestic affair. Oh, it's okay. You'll get over it. It's what having a father is like. He's just being a man. He's just taking control. What advice would you give to someone that is going through the same situation or something similar to what you went through?
It was hard, but I took the determination. I said, I need help because I was very self-sufficient, trying that I could do everything myself. And thank God, being in the United States, the system, helps a lot. And they helped me in that time. And I could come out from that violence little by little to the point that today I don't think in that anymore. It's a point in my life, maybe because of my age, I turned the page. This is just the past.
Well, to be honest, I'm still in denial, to be very honest. And I still blame myself as a man. I blame myself, I think a lot of men are in denial that this happens to men. But I did make the first step, and I guess I would say that people should, again, like you said, look for resources. There are, at least in the U.S., there are plenty of, I'm learning now that there are a lot of resources, but at first I thought they were only for women. I never heard of resources for men until I moved to New York, and I've been here for 15 months. And I just heard about it 5 weeks ago. So I didn't know. I swear I had no idea. I assumed that this is only for women.
I would encourage anyone in a situation related to domestic violence to start talking about it. Reach out to places like Sanctuary for Families and ensure that you start looking for the resources. Look for help. There are people out here wanting to help you. It takes a phone call.
You are cutting that cycle because you are coming out. Just being here with all of us, oh my God, that's great. You are finishing that somebody started. It's like say, hello, I'm here. That's it. No more.
We've heard a lot about different ways in which Shantae J, Maria, and John, and your own family sort of have dealt with people who have been very violent. But in domestic violence situations, there's also this power and control that's happening where somebody is abusing their power over the other person. Sometimes this comes out in physical ways. Sometimes it comes out in sexual ways. Sometimes it comes out in other ways that aren't apparent. But I do think it's important for people to think about domestic violence, that it is about this power and control. It can manifest itself in different ways, but it's not just about physical violence. So what do you think about what everyone has said?
I think it answered my question that culture does play a big part in where domestic violence comes from. It also shows me that people have the choice of being an abuser. It's not something that you have to do, even though it might be your culture. It's not something that you have to do, but sometimes that's just the kind of person that they are. And sometimes we need to learn how to distance ourselves from those kind of people.
From the conversation that we have had today, what's your takeaway?
I think it's important to know that this is not something that you should keep to yourself. It can be very harmful to keep all of this bottled in. So I think everyone that's going through this problem should find someone to talk to, like a family member, a friend, or a teacher, someone around them. Find someone to talk to about it.
Kezia, thank you so much for being the host of this conversation, for inviting other people to talk about their experiences and talking about your own experiences.
Thank you for inviting me.
This podcast was produced in partnership with Brick. Thank you for listening. And for more information, go to sanctuaryforfamilies.org.